My presentation tonight's titled Urban Carp, Fly Fishing the Phoenix Area Canals. And while geographically speaking, I'll be referring specifically to the SRP canals here in the Phoenix metro area. A lot of this information is going to apply to carp fishing in just about any urban setting. So a canal, an urban pond, or even a creek or a small stream. This photo is taken outside of downtown Scottsdale. This is the Arizona Canal. You may recognize the couple in this photo. This is Jeff and Granny Courier. This is one of my favorite action photos. And the reason for that is because it's that moment where you can't tell if they're going to catch this fish or if he's going to go for a swim. So this presentation is adopted from manuscripts appearing in Southwest Fly Fishing magazine. I did a piece that appeared in the March-April 2019 issue. For those of you that used to subscribe to Southwest, you're probably aware that they've consolidated their 3 regional publications now into one called American Fly Fishing, but they still have the same website, matchthehatch.com, where you can go and check out back issues as well as digital copies if anybody's interested in checking out that piece. So I've kind of broken tonight's presentation down into 5 chapters. I'll kind of start off with an overview on urban angling in the Phoenix metro area. I'll also talk about the equipment that you'll need to get started, as well as some of the tactics and techniques that I use when I'm fishing the canals. I'll talk a little bit about canal access and then just a closing statement on the convenience of carp fishing. So this is the follow-up to that opening shot. As you can see, they did land the fish. It's a gorgeous grass carp. You know, grass carp have kind of, you know, they've been called everything from a trash fish. But as you can see, this is a great looking fish in my opinion. So the first question I'll address tonight is, why would anyone want to fish for carp in the first place? I mean, after all, I just said, you know, they're commonly referred to as a trash fish. You know, but that's a gross misconception, because the reality is carp fishing can be both challenging and rewarding. I've had some of my most exciting days fly fishing for carp on the canals here in the valley. And on the flip side, I've had some of my most humbling days fly fishing for carp on the canals here in the valley. Another exciting feature is carp can be sight fished. Here in the Southwest, they've kind of garnered the nickname the desert bonefish. And the reason for that being that they have a lot of similar behaviors to what you might experience or encounter with bonefish on a flat. And then some of the techniques we use are also going to be similar. Carp are elusive and spooky creatures. This is probably the thing that makes them the most appealing to me. This is a fish that's not easily fooled, not easily hooked, and not easily landed. Carp can be extremely selective towards flies. Their takes are also very subtle, meaning you'll rarely feel the tug on the business end of a fly rod. Most of the time, you know, kind of going back to that sight fishing, you're almost going to have to see the take to know that that fish is there. And then, you know, carp can take you into your backing. And that's because carp get huge. As you can see in this photo, this particular common carp, he's about as big around as he is long. And with that being, you know, stated, this fish has the ability to take you into your backing because he's got more pull power or pull strength than really any carp, or I mean any trout you would encounter in the state of Arizona. So I won't go into great detail on the Salt River project, but the canals here in Phoenix are part of the Salt River project. The purpose of the Salt SRP is to provide water and power to the valley. This particular shot is the Arizona Falls on the Arizona Canal. It's a natural drop in elevation along that canal. This is, for those not familiar, it's located on Indian School Road in Phoenix on the Scottsdale border, not too far from the downtown Scottsdale area. And it's a fun place to take out of town visitors. They've got some information as far as the history and whatnot on the SRP project. So this is a map taken from the SRP website. These are the Phoenix area canals. As you'll notice, the canals are part of the Salt River drainage. On the north part of the Salt River, you've got the Arizona Canal and the Grand Canal. And then there's also the Crosscut Canal. And then on the south, more on the southeast valley, we've got the Eastern Canal, the South Canal, the Western Canal, the Highland Lateral, and the Tempe Canal. So what kind of fish are in the canals? Probably the most sought after by particularly fly anglers are the white emerg, more commonly known as the grass carp. These are the only species that SRP and Game and Fish stock in the canals. They're easily identifiable by their lack of mouth barbel. They've also got the smoother dorsal fin. They lack the bony protrusions like the common carp. And then they've also got the white bellies. You'll also find common carp. Common carp are naturally occurring. They make their way in through the Salt River drainage. They're also found, as you might guess, in the Tempe Town Lake, and as well as the Salt River recreation area. We also have mirror carp. While technically mirror carp are just a genetic modification of a common carp, it's a, sort of an exciting, really pretty fish that you'll find in the canal. Other fish you might find are tilapia, catfish, bluegill, and several different bass species, with probably the largemouth bass being the most common. Next, I'll talk a little bit about getting started. So first, the rules and the regulations. Fishing is legal in the SRP canals. An Arizona state fishing license is required, however. Urban license, or the community fishing license, is not valid. You have to have a state fishing license. All grass carp must be released unharmed. This is because SRP, like I said, they stock this particular species for the purpose of weed and algae removal. And then entering the water is also prohibited. So our basic equipment, you'll notice there I've got a 9-foot, 5 to 6 weight fly rod. This is really, your average moderate trout setup. A matching floating fly line, and then 2 to 5x leader and tippet. Personally, I probably use 3 and 4x the most. If the water is a little off-colored, I might start off with the 3x. If the water is a little clearer, I might go to the 4x. And then if I'm getting a lot of refusals, I might drop down to the 5x. You also want to have a long-handled landing net. As you've probably noticed, the size of these fish is going to warrant a large hoop. And then because sometimes the water level can be down a bit from the path, it helps to have a long handle in those situations. And then, no fly fishing presentation would be complete without mentioning the importance of polarized sunglasses. But in this case, polarized sunglasses are imperative because, as I mentioned, we're sight fishing. So whenever you're sight fishing, you're going to need those polarized glasses to let you see past that glare on the surface so that you have a better view of what's happening below. This is sort of a random selection of carp flies. By no means is this list exclusive. This is just some of the patterns that I've had success on. Rainey's hopper, hybrids, the McLovin, Zug bug is a common commercial pattern that does well. Also soft hackles and just your basic eggs. And this is sort of a pseudo original pattern that I've created. And I say pseudo original because those of you that have been around fly fishing for a while will probably recognize that that's a Chernobyl ant pattern. The only difference is instead of tying the traditional body, I use green leech yarn as well as a green color palette. And then I tie this on 3 and 4X streamer hooks, size 4 to 12. Probably the size I use most often, or I use the most, is a size 6. The reason I use the size 6 is it has a wide enough hook gape that I seem like I get a little bit better hookups. I prefer the streamer hook because I want this particular pattern to ride as low in the water or low in the film as possible. And then as far as the 3 and the 4X, that's kind of how I tie the big and the small version. I tie the 4X when I want a little bit bigger one, and instead of going to a smaller hook, I just drop down to the 3X long for the smaller version. And then another original pattern is one I call the random vegetation fly. This is kind of my go-to ambiguous vegetative subsurface pattern. Again, I utilize the olive leech yarn. I'm a big fan of the olive leech yarn for the sort of natural vegetation type movement that it makes. I find that it is particularly effective on the grass carp. You'll notice the iridescent floss and the peacock curl. I kind of feel like the iridescence brings the fish in. However, in my experience, any type of flash, especially when we're talking the grass carp, the flash seems to be a turnoff. So any of the patterns that I tie for carp fishing, I never tie any flash of any sort in there. Although I will do, like I said, some of this iridescent type material. Now I'll kind of talk about some tips and techniques that I use when I fish the canals. So when to fish, carp like it hot, and here in Arizona we have an abundance of heat. We can fish for carp in the canals and the urban waters here in Phoenix pretty much year round. Now, that being said, keep in mind that during those coldest weeks in winter, like early January, the fish are going to be a little bit more lethargic, and they're probably not going to be feeding extremely active. And when they do feed, it's probably going to be at the hottest part of the day. And then on the flip side, in those warmer weeks, particularly those around like the July 4th weekend, then you might find that the fish are a little bit more active, more at sunrise and sunset than they are at midday. Right now, this is a great time to get out and hit the canals, because as the temperature is starting to cool off, you know, the canals around my house right now are fairly low, which makes, well, two parts make it a little easier, right? The water right now, I'd say, has around 2 feet of visibility, give or take. But the fact that the water level is pretty low, the fish are pretty easy to spot right now. So sight fishing is very possible. And, you know, right here lately, and probably for the next month or so, they're kind of active all day long. I haven't really noticed a time where at this particular time of the year where they're not feeding. Where to fish? So the short answer to this question is anywhere there's water in the canal, there's potential to hold fish. I don't really think that there's you know, one area that fishes better than another area, you know, consistently. For the most part, the place I would suggest starting is a place that's near your home or near your work, just for the convenience, because what's really going to help is spending the time out there, getting the more time you spend on that particular section, you'll start to notice their behaviors. When do they start getting active? When do they feed? Feed most active? And then once you start angling for them, when are they more likely to take the fly than other times? Now, that being said, as far as hot spots, in my opinion, the hot spots are often are the locations where SRP has drained the canals to do maintenance. And when that happens, the fish, as you might expect, they're very visible. The water concentration's low, so it's easy to see those fish as they move around. Also, from time to time, SRP will drain the canal completely to do construction type maintenance. And when that happens, they'll generally relocate those fish from one section above or to the section below. So if you're driving around town and you happen to notice a section that's, either the water's low or the water's completely drained, when it's completely drained, I would try those areas above and below, because more than likely there's a higher concentration of fish in one or both of those particular stretches. Next, we'll choose our approach. So I generally try to fish the canals upstream. The canals, just like a small stream or a river, there is a current. It's not always obvious because sometimes it's pretty slow, but the water's always moving a little bit. And just like those trout in the small stream or the river, when they're feeding, they're generally facing upstream, looking for the food coming towards them. So by taking a upstream approaching from downstream, we can kind of take advantage of that blind spot that the fish have behind them as we make our approach. We also want to avoid casting any shadows. By this, I mean, I want to try to keep my shadow off to the water to my side or behind me so that I don't alert the fish to my presence. And then I want to walk slow and I want to tread lightly. These fish are super spooky. They have highly evolved lateral lines. I call it the early warning system. As you start to make your move, more often than not, about the time you spot them, that's the time that by the time you see them or when you spot them, they already realize you're there and they're gone. A lot of times you'll just see the cloud of silt that they've left behind. And then I want to have a game plan for landing these fish. Sometimes these canals can be pretty low, which means there can be like a 3-4 foot difference between the water level and the path above. So when it comes to landing that fish, I'm kind of scanning up ahead and behind me, looking for stairs or ladders that I might be able to use to get down closer to the water to help land the fish or to release the fish. And then I'm also looking for obstacles where if I catch this fish and I can't get down to the water, what's going to keep me from getting to the other side? Or do I have sometimes there might be a bridge where I can fish here, but if I hook the fish on the side I'm on, I can cross that bridge and get to the other side where there might be a ladder or some steps that I can utilize. And then I always want to be ready to cast. So this photo illustrates several things. First, you'll notice that my fly line is stripped off and in hand. I am ready to make a cast. Second, notice my shadow. My shadow is to my side. It's off the water. My body position, I'm walking right along the edge of the canal. And the reason for that is I want to be able to see all the way across the canal, but especially I want to be able to see up against that edge that I'm fishing. And then notice my head. I'm not looking down 10, 15, 20 feet in front of me. I'm looking out 30, 40, 50 feet because that's the kind of distance that I need to spot these fish to have some sort of opportunity to get into position and make a cast without them seeing me. Because like I said, by the time I can make a clear visual reference of the fish, they probably already know I'm there. So as we're looking for these fish off in the distance, these are kind of what we're going to, as I say, the identifying carp behaviors, these are kind of the behaviors that we're going to see. So again, these are somewhat ambiguous. They're not real descript, but there's a little clue in each one of these that kind of give us an idea of what this fish is doing. So the first fish that you might see would be the surface feeder. This is my favorite fish because he's actively feeding on the top, and he's the fish that I probably have the highest percent to get a hookup if I can place that fly in his ring. Now you'll notice you barely see his mouth. He's, you know, these guys have really light takes. They're not coming up and hammering the flies typically, or whatever they're eating. They're kind of going up and they have a tendency to sort of nib at it. A lot of times you'll see them go up and they'll like just kind of pluck at the protrusions of your fly, the legs, the tails, etc. The next type of behavior we'll come across is what I call the wall muncher. So in this photo, you'll actually notice there's 3 backs. And what these fish are doing is they're actually eating off of the algae line that will start to grow at the water level. Once the water level reaches a spot where it kind of stays firm for a while, meaning it's not fluctuating up and down, as the water or as the light penetrates those first few inches of the water, you'll start to get a pretty prolific algae growth. And these guys will go up there and just, you know, eat like crazy on that algae. Now, I will kind of tell you, if it's the real thick, fresh algae, the real thick green, dark green, they seem to prefer that over the more muted brown, but they'll eat both. But when you see that fresh, really dark, thick algae on there, that's like right here. This picture's got the algae I'm talking about. These guys will be lined up all the way along the canal eating that. Next, we've got the tailing fish. This fish is feeding on the bottom. His head's down, his tail's up. The difference with this fish versus the first 2 fish is this fish, I'm probably not going to throw a dry fly. That's not to say that he absolutely wouldn't take a dry fly, but the fact that he's looking down, I'm probably either going to suspend a fly under a dropper or an indicator, or I'm going to throw a streamer. And it kind of depends on the species. If we're talking grass carp eat vegetation exclusively. So that means the food that they're eating doesn't have any side-to-side movement. It moves with the current. It never tries to escape or makes any erratic movements. It's just going to have a real slow sort of natural flow. So if I'm fishing to what I can identify as a grass carp, I'm probably going to suspend a fly and I'm going to let it slowly sink in like vegetation does. And I'm going to try to intersect it so it goes right past his nose. Now, if these are common carp, I could do the same technique, or I might throw a streamer, something with some dumbbell eyes that I can actually throw kind of at a 45-degree angle and kind of work into his feeding zone. And the reason for that is because common carp are more omnivores. They kind of eat a little bit of everything. Next, we've got the cruising fish. Cruising fish, pretty self-explanatory. These are the first fish that are moving. So this photo, you'll probably notice right away there's that fish right against the wall. But what might not be as obvious is that second fish that to the left, you can see that dark spot on the tail. Normally with cruising fish, these are kind of hit or miss, particularly the ones that are swimming with the current or swimming downstream. I don't always have a lot of success with those fish. However, when they're paired up like this, I feel like if I have the opportunity to cast the fly and I can put it kind of in equal distance or let the presentation drift where it becomes equal distance to both fish, there's always the chance that one of them will spot it and it'll kind of kick in a sense of competition. And when that happens, instead of going up and playing with it, one of them may go up and aggressively try to get it away from the other. That's kind of how I approach the cruising fish. Next, we've got the suspended fish. Again, pretty self-explanatory. This is the fish that's hovering somewhere in the water column, just hanging in the same position. He's holding position with the current. But, you know, he could be closer to the bottom. He may be closer to the surface. If he's closer to the surface, I feel like it's more likely that he's possibly feeding. The deeper he is, you know, it gets a little bit more hit or miss. But with that suspended fish, this is the fish that I'll either throw the dry fly and let the dry fly drift over, or I might throw the dry with a suspended dropper. And with that dropper, I'm gonna try to get my depth and my distance that I lead the fish. meaning the distance that I cast ahead of it, appropriate, so that I allow that dropper fly or that subsurface fly to slowly, naturally drop down into his feeding lane. So again, that it sort of ideally will intersect the fish right near the head within a couple inches. Now with this fish, if I drift a fly past him and he doesn't spook, I might make 2 or 3 casts until he spooks. Now I don't want to waste too much time on any one fish, but this particular fish, if he's not startled by the first cast, you might have 1 or 2 more chances to try to work with your placement or your presentation to get it in his zone. And then finally, we have what I call the bottom grazers. These are the fish that are down on the bottom, plowing the silt, turning it over, and feeding on the bottom. In this particular shot, it looks like there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4 fish. Could be a few more. In my experience, a lot of times these tend to be the commons. So with that being said, I can kind of, like I said with the tailing fish earlier, I have a couple different ways I can approach this. I can certainly bring a fly in a straight line path, but if I throw a streamer or something with dumbbell eyes, I can cast anywhere from a 45 to maybe even a 90-degree angle to try to bounce those flies into his zone. Now, I'll also point out that this is the same visual that you'll get on the pot of fish that you've just spooked. When you come up on a pot of fish that are feeding and you startle them, a lot of times they'll take off in every direction, they'll scatter, and all you'll have left are these clouds of silt. The way you can tell the difference is if you spook the fish, that silt cloud is going to dissipate pretty quickly. But if these fish are actively feeding, they're going to continue to turn that silt, and it's going to continue to make that cloud in the water. And I've kind of been touching on this, but presentation is everything. Like I said, if you're fishing to the grass carp, it's almost imperative that you have a straight line path, meaning you cast straight up and the fly goes directly parallel to the bank. You don't want it moving in at an angle because vegetation doesn't come across the water at an angle. If you're fishing to grass carp or common carp rather, now you've got a little bit more leeway as far as how you can approach that fish. In either case, being an above average caster is going to be advantageous. The fly placement is really going to up your carp game. But that being said, if you're somewhat new to fly fishing, or maybe your casting skills aren't the sharpest, casting to the carp in the canal is a great way to hone your casting skills. I'm a fan of casting at the park to develop technique. But as far as developing your aim, I really like to have a target. And I think this is where, you have that opportunity to put in that extra time before your small stream or your river trip, where again, you need fly placement and accuracy. The canal is a great place locally to warm up or kind of hone those skills. Now, from time to time, the canals are going to be off-colored, where visibility may only be a couple inches. This happens for a couple reasons. Usually it's because the water's high, and usually if the water's high, that's because they're releasing water from the Salt River or they're releasing water from the Verde. Both of these will tend to cloud the water up pretty bad. If you can't see the fish, obviously the sight casting becomes nearly impossible, but what we can do is we can still look for structure, because carp, like most fish, they kind of tend to gravitate towards structure for cover. So in the canal, structure comes in the form of discarded refuge. Often that's going to be things like you see in this photo. There's a tractor tire, something that looks like a filing cabinet or a refrigerator, and then a grocery cart. Just this morning, I was walking one of the canals by my house, and I saw a downed tree branch that had fallen in the canal, and behind it was like 4 or 5 carp sort of stacked up on the bottom, just chilling behind that branch. So structure can be, worth throwing a fly just in case. And then you want to be persistent. You know, like most things worth learning, your trajectory is not going to be one of constant successes. What will often happen with carp fishing is you'll have these moments where, you know, you're the more often you get out there, the faster your learning curve, or you'll start having what I call these aha moments where you're putting it together. But the great thing about fly fishing for carp, or fly fishing in general, is then you're going to have those days where everything you've been putting together kind of falls apart and nothing seems to work, and you're back to square one of trying to figure out, you know, what are these fish doing, and you know, what do I have to do as far as fly selection and fly presentation to get them to take it. Real quick, I'll talk a little bit about canal access. So again, this is the map from the SRP website. This is a great resource for anyone who's not familiar with the canals or the canal waterways, to know kind of where they're located in the valley. Generally speaking, you can access the canals from any major road that crosses them. Most of these canals are going to have a recreational path on either side, sometimes both sides. It's either going to be gravel or it's going to be paved. And wherever it crosses a main road, you can generally access the canal. The caveat, or the catch, is parking. Finding a place to park becomes a little trickier, because most of the businesses that are located near canals will have signs posted discouraging folks from parking there for canal access. Now, certainly anglers do it a lot and get away with it. You know, that's kind of a risk you have to assess. Second, you know, maybe you could park in a neighborhood to access the canal, but some of the neighborhoods have signs posted discouraging parking there as well. So my advice, if you want to stay out of trouble, is to park in a designated canal access spot, which for the most part is going to come in the form of city parks. So if you're in the Phoenix or central Phoenix area, 4 parks that have canal access are Steel Indian Head, Steel Indian School, Granada Park, Francisco Highland Park, and Circle K Park. In the East Valley, you've got Evelyn Hallmark Park in Tempe, Kiwanis Park, Sheep Herders, Greenfield, Park of the Canals, Palo Verde Park, Carriage Lane, Harmony Park, Riparian Preserve, McQueen Park, Freestone Park, Paseo Vista Recreation Area, Tumbleweed Park, and I always have problems pronouncing the last one, Tibshanary Family Park. And then 3 in the West Valley are Thunderbird, Grand Canal Linear, and Glendale Heroes. And then quickly, a statement on the convenience of carp. So metro fishing has its benefits. Right here, I've kind of put a statement together. It says, while fishing the SRP canals may not be as scenic as a high country trout stream, there are plenty of conveniences like nearby shops and eateries. And by conveniences, usually these canals where they cross main roads, they're only going to be maybe a block or 2 from, say, a gas station where you could go get some snacks or a drink. Or you might be a short walk to a fast casual or a fast food eatery. There's also some breweries around town that are located near the canals. So lots of conveniences. The other thing that is worth mentioning is this is sort of local fishing for us. This is our backyard. This is the fishing trip that we can decide on the spur of the moment to go out for 45 minutes, and if it's good, stay for a couple hours. And if the fishing's, you know, subpar or so, we can be fair weather and call it and go home. Unlike going to the Mogollon Rim, which is kind of usually a day commitment, meaning that once we get there, we don't want to just turn around and head back because the fishing's not good. So we kind of stick it out or grind it out. Going to the White Mountains, that usually involves at least an overnight trip. This is something that's available to us, potentially 365 days a year, and we don't have to invest a whole lot of time. However, I will advise, if you're going to walk around town toting a 9-foot fly rod and smelling like fish, be prepared to get some strange looks. I'm sharing this from experience. Walking around town, carrying a big landing net and the long rod with a backpack and a fishing lanyard, as you might expect, you're going to get some interesting comments from folks. But most of the time, I find that they're more surprised than anything. One, that there's fish in there to be caught, and if they see us catch the fish or they see the fish that we're catching, they're amazed at how big they are. So that's sort of another element that's unique to our type of urban angling. So this is the end of my presentation. For anyone interested in checking out my graphic design or illustration work, you can go to my website, gentrysmith.com. I've also got some of my old Southwest fly fishing articles at fishbum.com. And then more recently, I teamed up with Steve Berry. We've started a destination fly fishing travel business, which, as you might have guessed, that's been challenging to say the least in a year of a pandemic. However, we have had several successful trips, and we're starting to fill out our list for next year. So if you're interested in any of that, you can check out our website. It's nomadaflyfish.com. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody again for having me, for sticking around. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any chance you could put the list of parks with parking and canal access maybe on fishbum.com?
I could do that, or I could send it to the are you who? I can't tell who's speaking.
Oh, it's Alan.
Alan. Yeah, I mean, I could do that, or I could send it to the clubs for them to post in the newsletter. The shots I have, the map is from the SRP website, so I'd probably hold back from printing that. However, you could certainly direct people to the website for those maps.
Well, yeah, I posted a link to the SRP website for their recreation section, but they don't seem to list any information on where there is or isn't parking.
Okay.
And since you had a list of, hey, yep, here are parks that you can park at and get canal access, I didn't see anything that matched
we could
those
certainly
lists.
Post that somewhere. We could put it probably on Facebook or in the club newsletter.
Great, thanks.
And Gentry, Alan posted the SRP link where people can download those maps. It's in the chat box.
Okay, great.
Hey, Gentry.
Yeah.
Gentry, I was just walking that canal, I'm over by the Chandler. I was watching that canal this morning, and it's amazing looking at the fish. They spook so easily. I was stunned by how easy they spook, but they're huge. And I saw all different profiles. They were sitting against the bank, or they were just like in a static position. But I rarely see big groups together. But today was kind of like all the above. I've never fished the canal, but they're big.
Yeah, well, and so right now, and again, I'm speaking for the canals near my place in the Southeast Valley, but I'm suspect it's probably like that around the valley. The water's low, and when the water's low, you get a better visual of just how many fish are in there, which makes those days when the water's higher and you don't see them, and you're almost like, oh, there's no fish here. And then you go when it's low and you're like, there were thousands of fish. How did I not catch one?
I had polarized glasses on, and stunning to take it off and put it back on again and look at the visibility. It's amazing.
Yep.
Cool presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And Gentry, one more thing to comment on is that the SRP canals are accessible, but the Roosevelt canals are not.
Nope. We're only fishing the SRP canals here in town.
Yeah.
Gentry, What
Yes.
weight rod would you suggest?
Oh, so I typically use a 5 weight. I know some folks that use 6 weights, especially those that like the fiberglass rods. Sometimes those guys will tend to go up a size, but I also I'm aware of people who fish them with 4 weights. So it's kind of personal preference, but for me, I kind of like I like a strong 5 weight.
Okay, thank you.
What about leader length?
Good question. So if I'm fishing pretty much anytime, I'm using at least a 9-foot leader. I mean, really, with the depth here, you know, it's never more than 3 or 4 feet at the most. Most of the time, it's only about 3 or 4 feet. I'm usually using a 9-foot leader to either my top fly, my dry fly, and then I might have you know, another foot or two, or a couple feet going down to a subsurface dropper. And then it's pretty much the same on a streamer. If you're throwing a heavy streamer, you may need to shorten up that leader length to make it turn over a little easier. But for the most part, I generally go with a 9-foot.
Hey, Gentry, it's Brady Busby here.
Hey, Brady. How are you?
Good tips. I've used them in the East Valley. Great to get on those carp. I use a 6 weight myself, but canals are fishing good. Thanks for the tips.
Right now is the time to get out. Like from now until, you know, it really starts to get cold, which probably won't happen until at least mid-December. The way this year is going, it may be till Christmas. And right now you're not really worried about high flows coming in. The water, the other part is the water's low, so the fish are very visible. Any other questions?
Right.
Well, with that, I'll turn it over to Frank. I appreciate everyone
actually-
coming out again tonight. Thank you.